As a software engineer, we don't usually like requirements. They're a pain in our neck. And as a manager, we don't like creating requirements. They're also a pain in our neck. But as AI shifts the bottleneck from engineering to how fast we can make product decisions, requirements might be the next big thing. And today on the podcast, I've got Chris Rickard, who has a company that's creating really cool software around AI and requirements that might be the key that we all need. It's an interesting episode. Check it out. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. And we're back for another episode of Product Driven. This is your host, Matt Watson. Very excited to be joined today by Chris Rickard, who is somewhere on the other side of the hemisphere, sometime in Australia, today in Vietnam. So this is pretty cool. Always great to have people on the show from all over the world. He has a company that helps software engineers do requirements. And it's a common topic in Product Driven. How do we help developers know what they need to build, the clarity, the vision, all this kind of stuff? So Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Cool, man. Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you're a software engineer. That's your background. And I think it's fair to say that all software engineers probably hate requirements. So is that a fair statement?
I think it is. I think 100%. I think I learned to love requirements when I moved to the other side. So I ran a software consultancy for a while, and requirements became. I saw it from the other side, but I think it's a fair call, right? You get a big list of things to do, and sometimes you don't want that.
Well, so when you say you saw it from the other side, what did you see? Enlighten us. So, maybe we're all in the darkness still.
Totally. So I think where I came from was, my business, we did, sort of a lot of internal software tools for large companies, where, what we needed to build was, critical, and essentially we had to get the sign off before moving forward. There was no way to be like, I'll tap on the shoulder level agile. We have a high level idea of what we want to do. So seeing it from the other side, I guess, really meant ensuring that like everyone was comfortable forward with what was going to happen. And so realizing that, building requirements, I guess the balance between the waterfall that we fought so hard against to diminish, and the balance of like, full cargo cult agile, where we have a rough idea and promise we'll get there. So actually having some more stringent, guardrails around requirements. And I realized for my company, that worked really well. So we could deliver systems with, still obviously allowing, we need to allow a certain level of serendipity and flow throughout the actual creation of the software. But yes, seeing it from the other side was really more about ensuring we have that baseline communication between all stakeholders, but there's still enough room for, the evolution of software whilst we're developing.
So you were doing bigger projects that were very well-defined, kind of statement of work projects.
Yeah, exactly. So most of our work was big things that took 6 to 12 months to build out. Yeah.
So is that what led you to start UserDoc, and tell us briefly what UserDoc is?
Yeah, certainly. I was a software engineer, sort of fell into starting a software consultancy. I was freelancing and had too much work, and then I brought a partner on, and sort of, it's a bit of a classic story. So ran that company for 8 years, and we did quite well. We had some very large contracts there, and was able to be acquired by a larger service business. So that was sort of maybe 3 years ago. And I was lucky enough to take a year off, and I traveled Australia with my wife in an RV for 12 months and was going, what do I want to do next? I'm not sure. The dream of after a service business, you often want to build product. It seems like the grass is always greener, right? Then you do product for 6 months, like, man, I miss getting paid by the hour. But yeah, so ultimately, like one of my, to the tail end of the last few years of that business, one of the things I really wanted to nail was that right level of requirements. And so I worked hard to do that with our clients and with our staff. So there was this little seed in the back of my head, which was around like, I didn't think Jira or project management tools was the right place to keep requirements. If you are building a large system that's going to keep on evolving over time, you don't train new employees by asking them to go back and look at the 50,000 Jira issues that have been solved over the last 2 years. But I also felt that like really open-ended wikis like Confluence and, even like some SharePoint and stuff like this wasn't like the right level of accuracy for requirements.
They're too freeform, right? They're too freeform.
no standards. Yeah, exactly right. And also next to them are the meeting notes from that last minute and your onboarding guide. So I feel like I felt like I think it deserved something of its own. UserDoc really just started out as a place for me to build requirements after I was working on. So the classic in terms of what the software did in its original form, it was like user stories, features, non-functional requirements, user personas, epics, these type of things we need to do to communicate how software works on a technical level, but also more importantly on like a functional feature-based level. So really around trying to build that ubiquitous language that everyone could understand before moving ahead and then throughout development. But this was 2020, it's 2022. And it was right at the kickoff of end of 2021. Either way, right at the boom of AI coming out and getting in everyone's phones and computers. So it took about 3 months. I had a few customers, but then we introduced AI, and it was just AI creation. Very simple at that point. And then quite quickly, it was obvious that that was where the direction was going to be. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey since then.
So tell me about how do you use AI to help build requirements, right? Because your software isn't going to know like necessarily what needs to be built or how the product works. So like, how does AI help with the requirements?
Totally. In two ways, right? So the first one is there is that stream of customers who have an idea, and obviously AI is great at fleshing that out. But ChatGPT is really great at fleshing that out. It's a no-brainer. So where it works really well is for businesses who already have, they've already gone through those initial like elicitation phases. They've had conversations. They've teased out that integral information, and they've put together an initial bunch of knowledge. So that might be a document, might be an initial high-level spec. So UserDoc can consume all this information and break it in like a wizard sort of format. Breaks it down into first of all, like the end users. So it pulls out who are the users of this piece of software, what are their goals, motivations. Then it goes through to breaking down the features for them based on what you've uploaded. You then get the chance to add your, the features are quite high level. So let's say it's like the registration screen with these form fields you mentioned. If there is knowledge uploaded where you say this is what we want to capture, it will definitely pull it out because it sort of builds an object model and knowledge graph behind the scenes about how it thinks the software is going to look. But you as the human can come in and add your expertise. So you can say, actually, we want Google single sign-on or whatever this looks like, a capture field or whatever that is. And then at the end of that sort of guided wizard, it takes you to, you've got a big list of your requirements, which are now fleshed out in quite a lot of detail. So this is an interesting point, which we've chatted about previously, which is around what level of detail do you want to produce? Because AIs can be, obviously, we all probably agree it can be very handy, but it can also go overboard and it can just create too much information. So we've really tried to strike the right balance of if a human hasn't given you the knowledge that you need to make a decision as an LLM, then let's back off a little bit and let's ask for more information. So it gives you like that bare minimum, and then you can basically have not a conversation, it's not a chat bot, but you can go back and forth to iterate. So like customers sort of say it's initial phase is maybe 50 to 70% faster than doing it manually. And then there is a phase of where you've got to add your human touch on top.
Well, for what you're doing for building all these requirements, and this does sound really cool, is the target user for this product managers, or who is the target user for your product?
Yeah, it's actually it's quite a few people in the business, but product managers, business analysts was the first the people that signed up, right? So business analysts especially, because they were writing these requirements every day, and they could take their spec or the high level note, pump it in, and then UserDoc puts it in like a really nice language. But it also understands what you already have. So if you've got a system with 600 features, it already knows your existing features. So it helps talk in your language. It helps say, after, if you have an order that has a status and then you're canceling your order, it just knows to update the order status to one of the statuses that you already mentioned. So BAs were like the main target. Product owners really into it, but obviously product owners and product management is a lot of things. It's not just requirements. There's a lot of stuff there. But yeah, so BAs were for the first 12 months, it was mainly business analysts, and I have a big business analyst online. But then we got a really clear signals, which is quite obvious in retrospect, which is most software is not new, it's existing. And that's when it's really hard to write requirements, right? When you've got a legacy system where you're entrenched with all this information. So then we went down the path of reverse engineering source code into requirements. Once you've done that step, you can make changes to that. So we've implemented that late last year after about 7 months of, I had to raise money, build out a team, and we've introduced the reverse engineering. So now our product's actually changed, right? So as soon as you can take existing source code and build out very detailed documentation of your current state, then it's not just BAs that are interested. It's actually everyone in the business. So we have developers, definitely product, but we've also got like CTOs, CIOs who have seats on the enterprise plans who come in and look at the requirements. So it's evolved into how I describe it now, it's requirements management, but it's basically like pseudocode for the source code. And when you start following that like track down, you realize that there's many people in a business who want to understand how software works, but they can't read the code. So it's a bit of an evolution.
Yeah. Well, I think, and so I've seen other tools sort of like this that could maybe analyze the code and give you different object models or different documentation and whatever. I think my problem with those kinds of tools and even requirements in general is if I'm the software engineer and I'm just trying to do my job for the week, just tell me what I need to know. Like, tell me the 3 things I need to know and don't tell me anything else, because I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours looking through a lot of noise, right? Like requirements documents can be huge. I mean, they could be dozens of pages, or I use a tool that analyzes my code and it gives me all this stuff, but I don't know what to do with any of it. It just creates a lot of noise, right? So how do you feel like we cut through that noise and give the engineers like, this is exactly what you need to know to go do your job without distracting you and making you wade through like all this sea of information? Because I feel like that is the magic part of this that almost has to exist.
What maybe what's an example of the sea of information you're talking about with this problem?
Well, just even if you're analyzing the code, if you've got 1,000 source code files, right? Like I don't want to see the documentation for 1,000 different files of source code, right? Or I don't want to see a 27-page document about the one project I'm working on. I just want to know, like, do you want the login screen or do you want Google sign on? Right?
Gotcha.
Like, tell me what I need to actually know.
Yes. So this is exactly, I really like you brought this up because it's something that I've tried hard to incorporate and something that I very much felt when I was day-to-day on the tools as well, which is engineers, we work in files, we work in source code, but the rest of the business doesn't work in source code, right? They work in features. And oftentimes when a non-technical person describes features, they end up writing a 26-page document, which is like, because it's so hard. A feature is not, there's no standardized measure of what a feature starts and where it ends. Is single sign-on a feature? Or is the whole registration screen a feature? Or is the whole authentication piece of it? Now, different companies will say, no, that's an initiative, that's an epic, whatever we talk about it. So the problem really stems from the lines being blurred about like what is a feature. As a dev, I believe what we really want to understand, I want to know the feature I'm implementing, or I want to know the changes to the feature that I need to go and make changes to. Again, so your example was great. I don't want to have to understand all these different files or whatever it is. So the way we've tried to handle that is essentially being very feature focused, first and foremost. You probably saw that coming. So feature focused. And so in UserDoc, you have your clear feature level acceptance criteria about what needs to be built. And then like you flip that on its other side and you can look at the technical details. So by that, I mean, let's say, I'll use the source code reverse engineering as an example. So a feature in like an old COBOL system, which we've helped in the last couple of weeks, might be a screen where someone can manage their credit card. That's like one feature. But behind the scenes, there actually might be 15 source code files, right? So you sort of bundle them up and you roll them up into this high level component because the business talks in features. I think developers want to get features. Behind the scenes, it trickles down. But yeah, it's very interesting. And also like what I've found in this journey is people use project management tools so different, right? So Jira or whatever we use, some people break them down into fine-grained little tasks, which is like, the form fit essentially a task, and some people make them ginormous, which is this whole piece. So it's what we've tried to do is strike a happy balance, but dude, it's one of the trickiest things ever.
I
So
mean, you have to be flexible, right? You have
yeah,
to be
that's
malleable to what
exactly
other
right.
people want to do.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's a funny journey we've gone on. Because I'm a developer. I ultimately wanted to build better software. That's where this stems from. But what I did was build a requirements management tool. But I'm really happy that after 18 months, where we've gotten now. So a feature I didn't mention, which is the long game, and we've just launched, which is we plug into AI development tools. So you build your requirements in UserDoc. Let's say BAs, product owners, they flesh them out. They move 70% faster. Then the rest of the business comes in and they like iterate on it and they confirm it. All looks good, ready to roll. Maybe it goes to Jira, whatever it is. But then AI devs can use like a Cursor or GitHub Copilot or whatever and can bring in all this context automatically into the AI context. So,
Now that's
if you're
pretty
familiar with
cool.
them, yeah. So this was where I wanted to head, but I had to build these annoying stepping stones to get there. So, vibe coding, it's kicking
Yeah.
off at the moment. So the only problem with vibe coding is if you say build me an accounting application, AI is going to be very confident about what it does, but you haven't given it firm requirements. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
where
no background.
that this yeah, exactly. So this is where we're closing the loop. So for developers, what I really want is them to get what you're saying here, which is like the bare minimum requirements that they need to know to do their job. And what I think is really interesting is when we provide that to an LLM and the dev, doesn't no longer has to do the mundane pieces. They just do the awesome, interesting parts, and the form field creation can just get done by an AI. That's my personal opinion, but it's a really interesting time, in 2025 with where things are heading.
Well, so let me ask you this. You gave a great example earlier of like order status or something. So you could have a big system that has order status being touched in multiple different places for different reasons. And through looking at the source code, you've picked some of that up. Through the requirements, you've picked some of that up. So as a developer, can I go into your system and just ask it, like, tell me everything I need to know about order status and how the order status
Yeah.
is used? Like, can I ask it those kinds of questions?
Yeah. One of our most used features is just chat to your requirements, essentially.
Okay.
So the example that I give in like, sales demos is essentially super complex system. No one remembers how it all works because it's too big to fit in your head anymore. Thousands of features. And what I want to understand is what time is that late payment report emailed again? Because I completely forget whether I'm a product owner, BA, or a dev, and I ask the requirements, it comes back and says 6 a.m. Monday morning. So that's just one piece, but yeah, you're exactly right. You can say in UserDoc, you can basically say where is everywhere in our system where the order status has changed. And so that is like you can as a technologist you can understand behind the scenes that's not a super monumental technology feat. It's vector embeddings, it's RAG, it's these sort of things. But like in terms of like customer value, it's huge. But you've got to get to that point for that feature to sort of make sense. So that's, we have that in the code base, right? We can search through our code and we can say, where is like order.status changed or something like this. But the problem is there's many ways that you can change a piece of code where if you
Well,
bring a language there.
well, and as you describe this, that's the other thing I want to talk to you about is like, okay, you're reverse engineering the code, which makes sense, but yeah, how do you know like how people name variables and
Yeah.
name database fields and call, all this kind of stuff? Like, how well does that go? Trying to
It's,
understand like what is order status versus somebody just names it something completely stupid, and you're like, we don't know that
I,
that meant
I can,
order status.
yeah, I can
Or
tell
what the
you,
statuses are, right? Like
dude,
status one means this, two means this,
yeah.
like, but nobody knows what that actually means.
So it's one of the most, I've been a software engineer for like 23 years. It was one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever done building this out and first even making. So I tried to build it 18 months ago and it wasn't possible. And I was like, well, it was a good idea, couldn't do it. I even paired with like a data scientist. I'm like, you're smarter than me. You should be able to do this. I'll be truthful. Like what actually happened was models got better.
Yeah.
The state of the art labs produced better models, and it was GPT-4 a year and a half ago, or whatever. When that came out, then we could start building really intricate knowledge graphs of how source code works and how everything fits together. So we do use a bit of static analysis to like find relationships between files. But in answer to your question, like how do we deal with terrible code where a variable is called X and it's really important, but it's just called X or whatever, right? The
Yeah.
way that we do it, basically, it's agentic, and we basically like come at the code from many angles, looking deep and looking up and building them all together. But it's it. I can't give too much away because it's basically our secret sauce, but it was very interesting. And so the answer is we do deal with it. And the
Okay.
way that we sort of started to conquer that, I mentioned COBOL before. So COBOL is one of the arguably most esoteric languages ever invented, which is very hard for the human eye to read and write. So that was the language we started with because we were like, if we can do COBOL, we can do Next.js, right? And it basically was one of the best decisions we've made. But yeah, so I'd love to, I'll give you what I'll do. I know you're asking questions. I'll give you a demo of it another time. I'll send you some free credits and you can check it out because I think whether it's UserDoc or whether it's someone else, I'm quite pragmatic here. I think we as developers, we're going to have a way to talk to our software in human form, talking about features, not files, in 5 years' time. So I think it's a really interesting paradigm.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, this sounds really cool, and at full scale, we have full scale ventures too. We have a couple of our
Yeah,
own startups we're building for and incubating right now. One of those products, by the time
awesome.
this airs, might be out in beta called EngagePath. But it's got me thinking, like, is this something we should be using? Um,
Yeah,
so I guess my
yeah.
question for you is
Okay.
who is the target for this? Is it a startup with two developers, or is it a big corporate company with 100 developers? Like, who
Yeah,
gets the
I'll
most
be
value out
honest.
of it?
Originally, like, I sort of told you my story at the start. So originally I thought it was software consultancies and agencies. But a year in, I realized quite quickly we had 100 seats being bought by large enterprise customers. So now we've, in the last couple of months, we've signed on some Fortune 500 companies that are not tech companies. They're like manufacturing companies and this sort of thing. So right now, the target market is anyone that builds software products, whether you are building it for internal use because you're a government or you're a company that makes cardboard boxes and you made your own scheduling app. It doesn't matter, but definitely, I think the main thing that's important here is some startups are moving so fast they don't care about requirements,
Sure.
and that's fine. That's agile, awesome. I went through an accelerator about 18 months ago, and my peers did not want to use UserDoc, and that was totally cool. The one vibe shift that has happened in the last few months is that if you can build great requirements faster and you can integrate them with AI coding tools, then now startups are starting to go, actually, you know what? I can see I can pay a lot more attention to the requirements because AI coding tools are so advanced now. We can actually put more effort on this side because we know that the old problem of, the problem with waterfall was essentially you'd have so many problems down the track that took so long. But if AI can make changes in a couple of minutes, that problem, the cost of change sort of goes away. So yeah, long story to answer your question, we're probably 50-50 with large
Okay.
enterprise and small business and startups. We're just
Well,
sort of
one of the
going
things,
man's, yeah.
and one of the key focuses in the product driven book that I'm writing is this issue of the bottleneck is moving, right? Like software
Mm,
engineering has always seemed like the bottleneck, right? Like how do we get more out of the engineers? How do we get more done? How do we get more velocity,
yeah,
right? So we hired product managers, we hired business analysts, we hired a QA team, we did agile, we did all these different
mm,
things really to make engineering get more done, right?
yep,
But your point is like, well, if AI is helping engineer getting things done quicker, now the bottleneck moves. Now the bottleneck
I think
moves to
so.
the business analyst. It moves to the product manager. It moves to these people that
Yep,
are making these product decisions. Where the software engineers now are they lack clarity. They lack clarity of like, well, what are we building? Why are we building it? How are we building it? And ultimately, they will lack focus because they're like, I don't know what to work on
yeah,
because I don't have key requirements for all these different things, and I alone don't even understand what we're building or why we're building it, which is a different problem. Like we need developers
yeah,
more involved in that too. But
yeah.
the point is like the bottleneck is moving, and I think it's a very
I
real thing that is happening.
Yep. You're speaking my language, Matt. Like I strongly agree with this. And, I can see I've got peers that are basically using senior engineers now as, they basically manage a team of 6 AI agents. We're talking tools like Devon that are a bit more autonomous than things like Cursor, like AI tools. You basically use Devon and you have like 6 instances that are going away doing things. You come back, you review it, you make sure obviously it's secure, it's using great coding standards, this sort of thing. But I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a lot of this across all corporate businesses. And the bottleneck is definitely like there's been a huge vibe shift around this in the last few months. And I've seen it because I've got companies coming to me which previously weren't interested and are now saying, actually, Our AI tools are going pretty good. Our devs are equipped with it. Now the bottleneck has moved. So you're onto something with that exact saying. Yeah.
Well, I think you might be in the right place at the right time for what you're building, which is fantastic. And what most people don't realize about entrepreneurship is a lot of it is timing, right? Like you said, like, oh, I tried to do this 2 years ago and the models weren't good enough. Or imagine trying to do this 10 years ago. You're like, I don't even know how I would have done this, right? And so much about entrepreneurship is timing and having the right idea, the right team, the right time. So it sounds like you're onto it, man. So big congrats to you. And I think this is something we should definitely try at Full Scale Ventures at a couple of my companies and see how it works. I mean, like most people, we have the challenge of like, okay, how do we make sure the developers understand what needs to be done? We talk about a lot of things, but we don't necessarily write it all down. And then the developers, for whatever reason, don't seem to remember what we told them during the status meeting. Like I tell them over and over what we're doing. This is the big picture. This is why it matters. Like make sure we do this, make sure we don't do that. Like we talk about a lot of these things. For whatever reason, we still miss the mark. And that's where getting some of it written down in an easy way in a product like yours may be really helpful. So I think a lot of people probably relate to this problem.
Yeah, and look, I think I had your exact same problem, and I think honestly where this came from was a backlash from waterfall of 10 old years ago, which was people were like, we went so far with writing things down that we just need to step back a bit. And I think maybe people stepped back too much. I'm not sure. It all seemed to work. But there's a really interesting pivot that's happening where you start thinking about AI. Well, AI is not going to be able to help you if it doesn't have the data. And AI currently, it consumes data predominantly via text.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a shift really soon that's already happening, which is people are starting writing things significantly more. And, the other reason that your team has that issue, like every team, is because the effort that's involved, right? So if we also have AI that makes things easier, like these amazing AI meeting makers that are changing, if we also have those in the loop, and then we have information stored in a, translatable textual format, then I think I'm very happy I'm alive in 2025. Let me say that.
I think some of it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, where I keep telling the team every day about this and that and whatever and all these things, but if they're not working on that specific thing today, it probably goes in one ear and out the other because they're just focused on like, how do I solve this one thing today? And now a week later, they might be working on something I mentioned a week ago, but they just kind of toned it out because they were working on something else, right? Like that's the hard part is that clarity and everybody understanding this. So trying to get it in a system like yours that is also super friendly to the developers and doesn't overwhelm them with information, I think is a really difficult problem to solve. But I'm excited to see and hear how you guys are doing it and may give it a try. So what does your product cost?
So it's per seat license. So it's like there's two plans, so $19 per seat or $25 per seat. $25 is our by far the most popular, and then we also have about 40% of our customers on like a custom enterprise plan, which is because they're bigger and they want things like SOC 2 and this sort of stuff. But $25 a seat. And look, I'll be honest and say we have some very large customers on our system who only have a couple of seats. And that's okay, even though it sounds like a terrible business decision. What we're going with here is the features that we've rolled out in the last 6 months are bringing, as you asked this question, it's bringing users across the whole software development lifecycle. So it's no longer just business analysts, it's product, it's CIOs, it's C-suite, it's developers, it's team managers, and it's QA. We also generate test cases and this sort of thing. So $25 a seat, you can have one user of your org use it and get a lot of value. And you can also roll it out across everyone. The only stipulation there is the source code import concept is not included in that because it's very specific about lines of code of your system. But that can be as cheap as $500 and it can go all the way up to $80,000 is the largest that we've done. So that is we're talking an 18 million line source code system right there. So not many systems are 18 million lines. So the vast majority,
a lot of COBOL if it was COBOL.
But the vast majority are, we're talking, even like 30, 50,000 lines of code can be quite a large system once you take out things like CSS and this sort of thing. So $25 a seat. So I tried to price it really accessible for people to jump in and have a go. And yeah, what I'll do, Matt, we'll organize a demo another time where I'll show you exactly how it works. And if it works at full scale, then awesome. Happy to give you a discount.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. If people want to learn more about UserDoc or you, where should they go?
Yeah, so userdoc.com. And then LinkedIn is probably the best for me. Unfortunately, it seems a bit lame, but that's where I hang out. Okay. Chris Rickard on LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Chris.
Thank you for having me, man. Excellent. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care. Thanks for tuning into Product Driven today. If you're passionate about building user-centric tech products, join over 30,000 tech leaders who receive the Product Driven newsletter directly in their inbox every week. Visit fullscaleteam.com/newsletter to sign up today for our newsletter. You can also view all of our episodes on YouTube and join over 50,000 others. And please follow me, Matt Watson, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.